Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Senate Republicans officially propose an infrastructure plan that's less than half the cost of Biden's plan. But Democrats likely won't vote for it because it doesn't include funding for green energy projects. 20 state attorneys general sent a letter to President Biden and congressional leaders. It's urging them not to expand the Supreme Court. A two-day virtual climate summit hosted by the United States, and Biden announced an ambitious goal. People in Missouri aren't happy about wind turbines being built near their homes. One county is pushing back by proposing new regulation. The national debt is growing to giant figures, but how will that impact the average American? We speak to an expert who tells us what this could mean. The House voted and approved a bill that would make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. It's the second time that the House has approved such a bill in less than a year. If Washington becomes a state, D.C. residents will be able to elect 2 senators and at least 1 House member. On Thursday morning, the Statehood Bill H.R. 51 passed the House with a narrow vote along party lines. No Republican voted in favor. The district has more than 700,000 residents. Democrats argue that D.C. residents deserve the same representation in Congress as their fellow Americans. But Republicans say statehood for the nation's capital violates the Constitution. At today's press conference, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said if Republicans could take back the House, what happened today with D.C. statehood would not happen. It's widely considered that the Senate will not pass this bill. And today, 20 Republican state attorneys general sent a letter to President Biden and congressional leaders urging them not to expand the Supreme Court. They called this a naked political power grab. NTD's Lin Lin has more.
Earlier this month, Biden created a commission to study potential reforms of the Supreme Court. Days later, House Democrats introduced a bill to expand the court from 9 seats to 13. Today, 20 attorneys general expressed their opposition to packing the court in a letter sent to Biden as well as Senate and House leaders. The attorneys argue these moves are a coordinated attempt to justify a naked political power grab by the leaders of Congress and the president. While the House Democrats argue the bill would help restore balance to the court, which currently has a 6-3 conservative majority, Republicans warn that court packing could threaten America's fundamental freedoms.
Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party is a lot more radical than the Democratic Party used to be, and they're perfectly happy to tear down the institutions of democracy.
They say court packing is ultimately a political move.
To make the court liberal so that when they fail at the ballot box, they can get the Supreme Court to enact their agenda.
Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich also wrote a separate letter to Arizona's Democratic senators to make the case against expanding the court. Lin Lin, NTD News.
President Biden kicks off Earth Day with a virtual climate summit joined by 40 world leaders. Biden pledged to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by the year 2030, but China didn't make any new pledges.
At the start of a 2-day virtual climate summit at the White House, President Biden announced an ambitious goal. By 2030, he vows to cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from 2005 levels.
By maintaining those investments and putting these people to work, the United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation.
The United States rejoined the Paris Agreement on Biden's first day in office, and he has elevated climate issues to a top priority. Biden wants the country to achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
No nation can solve this crisis on our own, as I know you all fully understand. All of us, and particularly those of us who represent the world's largest economies, we have to step up.
But U.S. environmental experts are concerned this would cost the economy trillions of dollars and raise energy prices and the price of virtually all goods. China, the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases, said they'd cooperate, but didn't give any specifics. Moreover, Chinese leader Xi Jinping didn't make any new commitments to cut their emissions.
China is playing Biden like a drum. He is willing to concede almost anything to get China to make promises to cooperate on climate change. But he won't be around to see whether they do any, whether they keep any of these promises.
40 leaders from around the world attended the event. The White House says the Leaders' Summit underscores the urgency of stronger climate action.
With the recent flurry of spending proposals, we take a step back to assess the United States' financial health. NTD's Christina Kim speaks to the head of a transparency watchdog to discuss national debt and what it could mean for the average American.
The Treasury Department estimates America's national debt to be $28 trillion. But a report from Truth in Accounting estimates the true value to be over $123 trillion. That's because the two groups count different things as debt. Adam Andrzejewski is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit OpenTheBooks.com, which tracks all government spending. He says the $28 trillion is real-time debt, while the $123 trillion figure is more of a long-term bird's-eye view.
The benefit of the Truth in Accounting report is that it details how politicians are conferring benefits that aren't funded and actually have no hope of ever being funded. The reason politicians do this is to get reelected.
He said both Republicans and Democrats contributed to the ballooning debt, but it's not getting any better.
It's our children and our children's children that are going to have to pay it back.
For example, President Biden proposed $6 trillion in spending within his first 100 days in office. Andrzejewski says the U.S. has never seen anything like this in its whole history. And he says there's a lot of wasteful spending in the bills that are proposed.
The CARES Act a year ago provided $80 billion for our nation's schools. It was so much money, they couldn't even spend $10 billion of it. And then a month ago, the American Rescue Act provided in one fell swoop another $128 billion for K through 12 schools. And the Congressional Budget Office says that 1/3 of that won't even be spent till after the next election. But then in Biden's infrastructure bill, he wants to provide another $100 billion for K through 12 schools. This is crazy.
He outlines 3 ways the growing national debt is likely to impact Americans.
The first thing is that everything you own today will be worth less. The money in the bank, your house, and that's because they've printed a bunch of money and devalued the value of your assets in real time.
Second, he says the cost of goods will be much more expensive. And third, he says taxes will go up, threatening Americans' prosperity in the future. Andrzejewski encourages people to educate themselves, speak up, and hold politicians accountable. He says at minimum, politicians should be given the time to read every page of a spending bill and publish the bills online so people can take a look before any vote is cast. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Stocks dropped the most in over a month after reports of Biden's proposed tax hike. Bloomberg says Biden will propose an increase in capital gains tax up to 43.4% for the wealthy. The hike is reportedly to pay for Biden's health care and family spending plan. And Senate Republicans today unveiled their own infrastructure plan. It costs less than half of Biden's $2 trillion plan. They called the over $500 billion plan a robust package and said it's the largest infrastructure plan Republicans can come up with. The plan includes traditional infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and waterways, but it also includes $65 billion to expand broadband and $60 billion for clean drinking water. But stripping the package of its green energy solutions won't sit well with Democrats. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says any infrastructure bill must include environmental measures. Senator Shelley Moore Capito is leading the Republicans' push for the smaller package. She says she has spoken with the White House and Democratic lawmakers about their proposal and that they look forward to hearing a response. And the House has passed a number of Democrat-backed bills that are unlikely to pass the Senate due to lack of Republican support. Now they want to change the Senate rules so they can pass their bills with no GOP support at all. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the story.
The House has passed many Democrat-backed bills that generally lack Republican support, such as federalizing voting rights, promoting gun control, expediting citizenship for illegal immigrants, and police reform to allow individual people to sue officers. President Biden supports all these bills, so the only thing stopping them from becoming law is the Senate filibuster. That's a rule that requires at least 60 votes for a bill to pass the Senate. Right now, that means these largely Democrat bills would need the support of at least 10 Republicans to pass. Some Democrats now calling to overhaul the filibuster.
We must not allow the Senate Republicans to deny our people everything we need to thrive.
They claim it's a racist procedure from the Jim Crow era, echoing the words of former President Obama. However, Obama in 2005 defended the filibuster.
But today's Democrats, on every topic, they go to race. And if you oppose whatever radical agenda they're trying to push, they call you a racist. The Democrats filibustered hundreds of times.
What's more, Democrats used the filibuster over 300 times in 2020, only now to dub it as a racist procedure.
Instead, it is a vestige of Jim Crow.
I would like to work with my Democratic colleagues on police reform. So to my Democratic colleagues, playing the race card won't work.
Representative Jayapal says she fears the Democrats will lose their majority if they can't pass these bills through the Senate.
They're either not going to come out and vote for you next time, or they're going to vote for the other guy.
And they say they're talking strategy with the Senate leadership on how they can get this done. Some warn that abolishing the filibuster could strip the minority of their voice for years to come.
The filibuster is the one tool that protects the minority party, no matter whether it's Republicans or Democrats, and people miss that.
Senator Graham said Trump actually encouraged Republicans to eliminate the filibuster when they had the majority, but they rejected the move. Now, whether or not the Senate filibuster can actually be abolished lies in the hands of two moderate Democrats. That is Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. But the House Democrats pushing to end the filibuster say they have a strategy for how to rally these moderate Democrats to their side. That is, they plan to go to the states of these two senators and get the voters to put pressure on the two moderate Democrats until they comply and support ending the filibuster. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
A county in Missouri recently discussed regulating wind farms. Virtually all of them oppose wind energy. NTD's Don Tran reports.
In Boone County, Missouri, the possibility of new wind farms is not welcomed by locals. County officials propose new and strict regulations for wind energy development. One attendee said she's worried about the health effects that windmills have on people.
It's on marginalized people who, children and elderly people and pregnant women. And I know that I can move, and I will move if I need to. So my partner has heart disease, and I know that this would hurt him, and I'm not willing to stay and watch it hurt him. But I also know that there's plenty of people who can't afford to move.
With the new regulations, wind energy companies would only be allowed in agricultural or industrial zones, and they need to request for specific permission for an overlay zone that lets them use the land for wind turbines. They'd also be required to estimate the amount of property, sales, and other taxes their wind farm project would generate. Goodman said she used to be an advocate for wind energy.
I was pushing for the governments, why aren't we doing this quicker? We've got to do this. We've got to save the planet, but this doesn't save the planet. That's the lies. It actually brings on planetary destruction quicker. And so I want to stand up against that.
She also said she lost some old friends over the issue.
I've been friends with her 40 years, and I've marched with them against war and against, environmental problems. And now they turn against me when I tell them these things, and they don't believe it. And it's like, look, here's all this information. And instead, they're quoting back to me information that's put out by the wind companies.
In December, 13 landowners in Howard County with a total of 8,000 acres had signed contracts agreeing to lease land to a wind energy company for turbines. The owners of about 3,000 acres in Boone County had signed similar contracts. Don Tran, NTD News.
Oklahoma State Senate lawmakers passed a bill this week pushing back against presidential executive orders. While Democrats call the bill a political stunt, Republicans are divided on the original language of the State House bill. Here's more from our reporter Estelle Lynn at the Oklahoma State Capitol.
On Tuesday, Oklahoma State Senate passed a bill that would allow the state attorney general to request exemptions from any executive orders issued by President Joe Biden if those orders are determined to be unconstitutional. Several state lawmakers voiced their support for this bill to protect Oklahomans from potential overreach of federal laws signed by President Biden.
Those of us that are pro-life had to be stunned when one of the first move of this president through executive order was to allow your tax dollars to be spent for abortions, not just in the United States, but outside this country.
The original version of the bill, passed by 79 members of the State House of Representatives, would even give the majority of state lawmakers the power to directly nullify presidential executive orders. However, this nullification clause was met with opposition not only from the Democrats, but also the Republican Senate leader. Republican State Senate Pro Temp Greg Treat issued a statement saying, as originally written, HB 1236 gives people false hope because it is an unconstitutional nullification bill that clearly violates separation of powers. The 10th Amendment says powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states. However, the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution states the federal Constitution takes precedence over state laws.
So there's some who just really want to push back on federal overreach, as I desire, and I think the majority of members of this body wish to do, and it's well within our right to do it. But you do not push back on the federal government by willfully violating the very Constitution that we're sworn to uphold.
Treat removed the original nullification clause and proposed to create a special task force under the state attorney general's office to evaluate the constitutionality of presidential executive orders. And the new unit would be funded with $10 million each year to carry out its mission.
This bill does what the bill that came over from the House did not do. It has teeth in it. Have we ever put $10 million behind a legal remedy to push back on the federal government? Today you have an opportunity to do just that.
Treat's changes to the bill placed him under fire from fellow Republicans. Hundreds of activists from gun rights and other conservative groups rallied at the state capitol on Tuesday to criticize him for watering down the bill. Several co-authors, including Senator Nathan Dahm, removed their names from the amended bill. Treat says his changes are necessary to push the bill through. If the bill crashes, there won't be any other vehicle to protect Oklahomans from federal laws that violate the separation of powers. Estelle Lynn, NTD News, Oklahoma.
Amid calls to defund the police, the progressive mayor of Los Angeles is instead increasing law enforcement's funding, but only by a fraction. This as crime rates in the city continue to climb. The president of LA's Police League suggests this is caused by last year's police cut.
To pledge
Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti is calling for a modest 3% increase in law enforcement funding. He's allocating $1.76 billion to the Los Angeles Police Department, or LAPD. This is up from the $1.71 billion that council approved last summer, when they cut the police budget by $150 million. This slash came after protests and pressure to defund the police following the death of George Floyd. Garcetti made it clear he won't be caving to these ongoing pressures Tuesday, saying, "If you want to abolish the police, you're talking to the wrong mayor." However, the policing budget is still lower than the amount he budgeted for the LAPD last year. Craig Lally, president of the Los Angeles Police League, told the Los Angeles Times that while Garcetti's proposed budget does make initial investments to add back officers to patrol the streets, it fails to address the significant damage caused by last year's cut. According to the LA Times, an aide to the mayor said the decision to boost the police budget was partly prompted by rising crime. LAPD crime statistics for last week show shootings are up 80% compared to the same period last year. Homicides are up 28%. And aggravated assaults have increased by 14%. The budget also includes tens of millions of dollars for initiatives aimed at preventing crime, like improving mental health, youth development, and reducing gang activity. The spending plan still requires city council approval.
What could be going on behind the continued protests and calls to abolish the police? An expert on Marxist groups and their covert influence says racial tensions are being used to spark a revolution in the United States.
Derek Chauvin has been found guilty on all 3 charges, but many groups and individuals are saying this isn't enough. America's law enforcement system is inherently racist and needs to be abolished. As an infamous Marxist saying goes, the issue is never the issue is always the revolution. Trevor Loudon is an expert on radical groups and their influence. He says the issue isn't about justice for George Floyd, police brutality, or racism, it's the revolution.
This is a demonization of the United States, and the demonization is there to set this country up for a socialist communist revolution.
And while many people simply wish to see justice upheld, Loudon says others want to start a revolution. And in order for that to happen, the country's institutions need to be abolished.
What you're seeing here is there's a narrative being set up. The goal is to destroy the police, to destroy power structures in America, because you need to destroy those before you can have a revolution.
Loudon listed a number of Marxist organizations that push the narrative of systemic racism in America and advocate for abolishing the police. Some of these either openly support the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, or have connections to it. Loudon says causing division through racial tensions and destroying America's institutions is in the interest of the CCP, and that the regime works behind the scenes with many of these groups to fan the flames. A Minneapolis-based group called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization is openly pro-CCP. It helped organize a number of George Floyd-related protests in 2020 and organized protests for the verdict of the Chauvin trial. The Facebook event co-organized by the organization said if Chauvin is not found guilty, there will be hell to pay, and we will take to the streets in our rage at a system that is incapable of delivering any justice to black people. Once the verdict was announced, the organization credited those who had taken to the streets, followed by this tweet, which clearly states their goals. People will still be marching tonight. As an organization, we see community control as a positive reform before we achieve revolution. Keep organizing. We have a world to win. Certain politicians are also suggesting Chauvin's guilty verdict is not enough. Loudon says that class or interracial struggle has driven numerous revolutions throughout history. Words like equality and justice are used to conceal the true goal of the movements. Loudon urges the unsuspecting Americans aiding this agenda to wake up. He says things will get worse until people see the communist tactics for what they are and stand up against them.
Coming up, a growing number of states are trying to ban biological men from women's sports. The latest is Pennsylvania. They believe this is necessary to ensure fair competition and safety for women. And Manhattan announced major changes in its prostitution policy. The new policy is believed to be the first in New York's history. That and more on NTD News. Pennsylvania lawmakers are introducing a ban to ban biological men from participating in women's sports. Two co-sponsors of the bill tell NTD concern over women's safety is a major reason they support the bill. NTD's Allison Lee has the story.
We have received a lot of calls from parents, both men, dads and moms, who are absolutely concerned for their daughters if there's a mandate for transgenders to play on women's teams. Again, this is all about safety.
To highlight the importance of keeping sports safe for young girls, State Representative Dawn Kiefer gives an example of a recent field hockey game between two schools in York County and Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The Lancaster team has two transgender women athletes, while the York team didn't.
They had two trans women on that team. And the two trans women were actually hitting the ball so fast and so hard, and they were outpacing even the fastest players on the team, that eventually the coach just from the York County team took his players and said, we're done. We're not playing anymore, for fear of the safety of his players.
39 Republican House members in Pennsylvania introduced the bill earlier this month. The House Education Committee is currently considering it. State Representative Valerie Gatos explains this is in response to President Biden's executive order that prohibits discrimination based on gender identity. It opened the door for transgender and biological males to compete in women's sports.
And it is discriminatory against women. And what I believe and what so many other people believe is that you should not, violate someone's rights in order to try to help somebody else gain additional rights.
Under this new bill, sports teams in public schools and colleges will be designated based on biological sex only. There is also a co-ed option. Gato says this is not meant to discriminate against transgender athletes.
So this is not a ban on transgenders at all in playing sports. What it says is that biological males will play on biological and males team, and biological females will play on female teams.
Kiefer believes it's important to figure out a way for transgender women to integrate into men's teams, but they should not compete in women's teams.
We need to figure out a path forward for everybody and that we are respectful and accommodating for everybody, but a way to do that fairly without really hurting our young women.
Kiefer says Biden should respect states' rights in addressing this issue. Governors in Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi have recently banned biological men from women's sports. South Dakota's governor has taken executive action on it, but North Dakota's Republican governor vetoed a similar bill on Wednesday. Pennsylvania's Democrat governor also vowed to veto the bill in his state. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Manhattan's district attorney announced that they will no longer prosecute prostitution. The new policy will affect thousands of sex workers and victims of sex trafficking.
Manhattan's district attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. requested the dismissal of over 900 cases related to unlicensed massages and prostitution. He says from their experience on the ground, prosecuting prostitution does not make citizens safer, but further marginalizes vulnerable New Yorkers. But the Manhattan DA will continue to prosecute sex traffickers, pimps, and people who pay for sex. A press release from the National Organization for Women, or NOW, says the promoters who recruit incarcerated women and target girls in the poorest neighborhoods will still be held accountable. The president of NOW in New York said DA Vance is leaving a legacy that sets the bar for a fairer criminal justice approach for prostitution and massage parlors. But opponents push back against this idea. They say sex work is an exploitive industry and victimizes its workers. Vance announced in March that he would not run for re-election.
New York City is beginning to open back up, and the mayor says getting vaccinated is the key to reopening. But it seems like not everyone wants to get the shot. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
Getting a shot in New York City is much easier than it used to be. For the first time ever, supply for the vaccine seems to outpace demand for it. The numbers also show that less than 50% of all adults in the city have gotten the vaccine already, but everyone over 16 years of age can get it. Statewide, even fewer people have gotten the vaccine. New York City Council member Mark Levine said even though more people have become eligible, fewer people are getting appointments at the city's most popular vaccination site. We asked unvaccinated New Yorkers why they didn't get the shot yet.
I don't think that it's trusted right now. There's a lot of companies that's doing it. I know they did a recall on Johnson & Johnson.
I don't know, just the side effects, I guess.
Because I am old enough now and I have good immunity and I wear 2 masks.
Oh yeah, I'm about to see what's gonna happen with it too, right? But yeah, no, I'm not gonna rush it, like I'm still healthy.
Just keeping up with my regular health, it just shows that I may not need it or ever have to take it.
So as you saw, people have all kinds of reasons on why they don't want to get the shot. But what surprised me the most is that most people who didn't get the shot didn't even want to give us any reason why they didn't. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
New York school buses are going green. Mayor Bill de Blasio commits to making all New York City school buses electronic by the year 2035. The city will start the transition soon. It plans to have 75 electric school buses within the next 2 years. The city will also expand some of its laws to require all new parking lots include electronic vehicle charging infrastructure. Air pollution from New York City traffic reportedly contributes to over 300 premature deaths and almost 900 visits to the emergency room annually. Blasio says the reduction in carbon and emissions will result in savings of about $18 million in healthcare costs. And coming up, we hear from speakers at a commemoration of the 40th Annual National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And a California man is battling court to keep his cafe open after the judge ruled that he violated health codes. More in just a moment on NTD News.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our income.
Our friends sold their policy to help pay their medical bills. And that got me thinking. Maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I was skeptical, so I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Don't cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies, or call 1-800-509-8500. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
It's National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and a panel of victims shared their thoughts today at a commemoration in California. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Thursday's commemorating conference shed light on several California bills. One of them, Assembly Bill 1509, is intended to reduce jail time for criminals that use a gun.
Now the AB 1509 want to shorten it to 1 to 3 years. That give the bad guy a chance to come out quickly and hurt more people.
AB 1509 is retroactive, which means many of the 29,000 California gun violence inmates could be released.
After about 25 years of serving, they may be up for parole. That is unacceptable.
An attacker shot and killed Garner's husband up close during a shooting spree in 2006.
People like that should not be offered the opportunity to walk free in the population when they have premeditated. This was a premeditated murder.
Current law says that first-degree murder under special cases are sentenced to life without parole. A proposed bill, Assembly Bill 1224, would allow second chances based on the defendant's behavior, age, or state of health.
I am fully satisfied with the outcome of what happened to the young woman who took my husband's life. She's put away. I intend to go to her parole hearings.
Jessica Cord, a Los Angeles County mother, lost her son.
So they beat him up at the party. They chased him 100 yards, beat him some more. He had blunt force trauma to the head. He had a stab wound through the heart, 2 in the back, gunshot wound to the head.
Cord said the murderer didn't like her son because of his skin color.
The parole process is rigged. Even the panel is rigged. Deborah San Juan treated my family with much disrespect. She even congratulated the killer After the parole process, she said, "Congratulations, you made parole," in front of my family.
According to the CDAA, statistics show that in 2019, there were over 170,000 violent crimes in California. The association says that National Crime Victims' Rights Week is a time for people to learn how the victims are moving forward and to fight for victims' rights. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A small cafe in Monterey, California is fighting to stay open. The owner is facing several court orders after violating health orders. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more.
This is Aloha Coffee and Cafe in Monterey. It has been closed since January 7th when the owner received a restraining order. In December, owner Richard Dunnick lost his health permit after the Monterey County judge ruled that he repeatedly failed to comply with the regional stay-at-home and face coverings orders, thus posing a health risk to his staff and the public.
How did I harm somebody? Where's the harm? To commit a crime, you have to have harmed someone. You have to have somebody, an actual victim. The only victim here is me and my family, and for trying to make a living.
He says he has GERD, a medical condition where his esophagus tightens, making it hard to breathe with a mask on. He wore a face shield while he worked, but that wasn't enough to stop people from filing complaints.
The reason they closed my business in the first place is because they discriminated against small business and discriminated against me for standing up for our rights and standing up for disabilities. And I'm not going to enforce discrimination.
After the cafe closed down, he remained open as a private social club. Under this status, he says he's legally allowed to treat it like his home and does not fall under the county or city's health rules for cafes. In March, a judge ordered PG&E to cut his gas and electricity. In response, he got a generator, but police came and confiscated that too. Now, all locks have been changed, and he's not allowed to go near his cafe either. Health officials have been patrolling to ensure that businesses comply with health guidelines. Dunnick says they've passed by his cafe over 25 times, and now he has 25 counts of contempt of court. He also set up a GoFundMe page for the club. He has filed over 20 affidavits against the city and county officials. He accuses them of violating 17 constitutional laws and infringing on his rights.
I want to do it for the people. It's we the people. We have to stand up to this tyranny, and that's exactly what it is.
There are no lawsuits as of now. He's had 4 court orders against him so far. His next hearing will be on May 3rd. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
One D.C. land developer called in a goldfish rescue team after discovering a pond full of pet fish. NTD's Sapphire Quarter tells us about the uncommon scene the responders found when they got there.
The Humane Rescue Alliance in Washington, D.C. rescued 143 goldfish from a pond slated to be destroyed. Developers are planning a new home across the area of the pond. The new property owner was surprised to find the murky water inhabited.
He didn't really have a plan as to what to do with the fish, and he didn't want to harm the fish.
His neighbor called Humane Rescue Alliance, who offered to help. When they arrived, they found that all but 2 of the fish were the same color as the bottom of the pond. This made them hard to see and count.
When we spoke to the developer over the phone, he sort of thought that there was maybe 50.
The rescuers started to drain the pond, limiting the area where the fish could swim. Over the course of 2 days, through slowly draining, they caught nearly 3 times as many as expected. Almost every fish was nabbed with a net.
I think at one point, one of the officers that was assisting, she looked down and sort of like, we joked that it was like Steve Irwin style. She saw it and sort of grabbed it with her hands and put it in the bucket.
The fish were placed in temperature-controlled buckets and transported back to Humane Rescue Alliance. All of the goldfish are ready to go to their new homes. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
Coming up, the UK Parliament unanimously declares the Chinese regime is committing genocide against Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. The Parliament's declaration puts pressure on Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government to go further in its criticism of Beijing. And a popular Chinese restaurant in Canada uses security cameras to surveil customers as they eat. Then the recorded footage is sent to Chinese authorities. More on that on NTD News after the break. The UK Parliament unanimously declares the Chinese regime is committing genocide against Uyghurs. The UK joins the US, Canada, and the Netherlands in this declaration. This is the first time a genocide declaration has passed the UK Parliament unopposed.
That this House believes that Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minorities in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region are suffering crimes against humanity and genocide, and calls upon the government to act to fulfil their obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide and all relevant instruments of international law to bring it to an end.
The members of Parliament backed a motion brought by Conservative lawmaker Nursat Ghani. The Parliament's declaration puts pressure on British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government to go further in its criticism of Beijing. So far, the government has imposed sanctions on some Chinese officials and introduced rules to try to prevent goods linked to the region from entering the supply chain. But a majority of lawmakers want more to be done. The Chinese Communist Party denies accusations of rights abuses in Xinjiang. The support for the motion is non-binding, meaning it is up to the British government to decide what action, if any, to take. An ambitious bill to counter China has just been approved by a U.S. Senate committee. It seeks to tackle China's aggressive behavior with a number of different tactics. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on that.
A sweeping bill to counter China has just been approved by a U.S. Senate committee. On Wednesday, the Strategic Competition Act of 2021 received overwhelming support from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Members voted 21-1 in favor of the action. The bill will now move on to the full Senate vote. The push for a harder stance against the Chinese regime is one of few bipartisan sentiments Congress seems to agree on. China's foreign ministry said last week that Beijing firmly opposed the bill. Spanning nearly 300 pages, the legislation details comprehensive methods for countering communist China. Tactics include cybersecurity, diplomatic strategy, and military deployment. The move also seeks to curb China's predatory economic behavior, like currency manipulation, and Chinese investment programs known to trap developing nations in debt. Amid China's rising assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region, the bill stresses the need to prioritize U.S. military investment there. It recommends nearly $1 billion in funding for Indo-Pacific-related military programs. The bipartisan bill recognizes China as a threat. It reads, "It is now clear that the PRC China has chosen to pursue state-led mercantilist economic policies, an increasingly authoritarian governance model at home, an aggressive and assertive foreign policy." Among the bill's last-minute amendments, a proposal to boycott the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics was also approved. Though ambitious, the bill is seen by some only as a positive first step toward meeting the China challenge.
Communist China's mass surveillance practices are popping up overseas. One widespread Chinese restaurant chain is using security cameras to record customers as they eat. Then the footage is sent back to Chinese authorities, likely for facial analysis. NTD's Don Ma has more.
China's authoritarian style of surveillance seems to be expanding to the West. Ever get the feeling that someone is watching? In one overseas Chinese restaurant, that feeling is justified. Haidilao restaurant locations are using security cameras to record customers as they eat. The footage is reportedly sent back to China's authorities for possible facial recognition analysis. What's more, the security cameras they're using are manufactured by a Chinese company allegedly tied to the Chinese military. Haidilao has over 935 restaurant locations around the world. One of its branches in Vancouver, Canada, was found to be using 60 cameras to monitor customers. The restaurant has about 30 tables. 2 surveillance cameras were pointed at each table. Reporters questioned the restaurant's manager about the purpose of the cameras. He openly admitted that they're using it to track people and confirmed that the footage was being sent back to China, possibly for facial recognition analysis. A previous Canadian mayoral and federal election candidate tells us that the cameras violate Canadian labor and privacy laws. She says they also present major security risks for restaurant customers.
Personal safety worries could arise when Xinjiang Uyghurs or people involved with the Hong Kong protests enter the restaurant, and their footage undergoes facial recognition and their location is determined.
She says that if the Chinese regime learns where someone lives, it could send Chinese authorities to find them.
The Chinese regime's surveillance system is very comprehensive. At any time, they can use facial recognition technology to obtain your personal information. If they know your location in Vancouver, for example, at any time they can send an envoy to Vancouver to have a chat or take actions on this person.
The Haidilao restaurant chain is headquartered in China. It was established in Sichuan province in 1994 and is one of the largest restaurant chains in the country. During its rapid development, it expanded overseas. The restaurant can be found in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and Taiwan, among others. Don Ma, NTD News.
A car bomb blast at a hotel in Pakistan killed 4 people on Wednesday. This hotel is where the Chinese ambassador to Pakistan stayed. Libby Hogan reports.
A car bomb ripped through a luxury hotel car park in the Pakistani city of Quetta on Wednesday. The blast killed 4 people and wounded 11. China's ambassador to Pakistan was staying at the Serena Hotel, but authorities say he was not there when the bomb exploded. The Pakistan Taliban claimed responsibility for the bombing. A spokesman for the militant group wrote in a text message to Reuters that a suicide bomber carried out the attack with a car full of explosives. But it was not clear if the Chinese envoy was the target of the attack. The Chinese embassy did not respond to a request for comment. Quetta is the capital of Baluchistan province bordering Iran and Afghanistan. It's also home to the newly expanded Gwadar deepwater port that is key to a planned $65 billion investment in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Chinese nationals and their interests in the region have been attacked before by Taliban militants and nationalist insurgents.
Coming up, British intelligence agency MI5 is opening an official Instagram account. Find out what kind of content you can expect from them. And new numbers show that the CCP virus is no longer the leading cause of death in England and Wales. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times? I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
British security service MI5 is opening an official Instagram account. It says it's to bust popular myths and reveal never-before-seen archive material. MI5 new Director General Ken McCallum wants the agency to open up and reach out in new ways, particularly in communicating with younger audiences. Instagram users can follow the agency via @MI5official and put questions to serving intelligence officers. Users will also be able to glimpse MI5 historical exhibits shared for the first time from the museum in the basement of its London headquarters. The British agency intends to use the platform for promoting MI5 career opportunities. And new official figures show that COVID-19 is no longer the leading cause of death in England and Wales. According to the UK Office for National Statistics, the CCP virus was the #1 cause of death from November to February. But in March, it dropped to 3rd place, accounting for 9% of all fatalities in England and 6% in Wales. The figures also show that deaths due to the virus fell month on month by 75% from February to March. The leading cause of death last month was dementia and Alzheimer's disease in England and ischemic heart disease in Wales. And Oxford University started to deliberately reinfect volunteers with the virus this week. They're calling it a human challenge study. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Oxford University says this study is the first of its kind. Once infected, volunteers have agreed to be infected again. The purpose? They say to better understand how our immune system responds to the CCP virus.
Then we will be able to look at people who have natural infection and say whether or not they're protected. We can look at the durability of protection. We can see how long their protection lasts. It will be a tool to allow us to develop next generation vaccines, better vaccines.
But deliberately infecting people with a potentially deadly virus raises some obvious ethical questions. President of Somos Community Care, Dr. Henry Chen, is supportive of the study.
So now volunteers are being deliberately infected with the virus that has caused so much suffering, so much death. How ethical is this, and how do researchers determine this?
They had to have an ethical committee to make that decision. But as a human, if they volunteer, they understand the risk and they want to help the entire humankind. So this is kind of become a self-satisfied. So we need to appreciate that. For their braveness. And anything happen in the medical field, we had to have some human study. So they volunteer themselves. I think that is the spirit, that's the braveness. We need to really, really appreciate it.
Young, healthy participants, 18 to 30-year-olds, will participate in the study. The study will use the wild-type virus discovered in Wuhan, China. But Dr. Chen says these results could end up being useless if variants like the UK variant predominate the wild type. Professor Helen McShane from Oxford University told CNBC they'll start with the wild type to demonstrate whether the trial's model is safe. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Losing one's sense of smell and taste from the CCP virus can be a horrible experience. For one group of people, it's an especially devastating loss: wine tasters.
The exotic fruits and fresh citrus notes leapt out of the Peranian white wine, but enologist Sophie Pallas said the delicate undertones of pineapple were harder to detect after she fell ill with COVID-19. Like so many infected with the virus, Pallas lost her sense of taste and smell, which has forced her to retrain her palate. But Pallas's livelihood depends on these senses. Pallas's story underlines the pandemic's risk not just for winemakers, sommeliers, and enologists in France's multi-billion-dollar wine industry, but also for chefs, parfumiers, chocolatiers, and others who rely on finely tuned taste buds or noses.
It was like a black hole. It was like I became blind with my sense of smell, and for me, it was a completely terrifying feeling of a total loss of my bearings. What comes with the loss of the sense of smell is the loss of the sense of taste. Beyond the fact that wine was no longer bringing me the same emotions, the same pleasure, since I could only detect the alcohol taste and the acidity.
France's wine industry is worried. A survey of more than 2,600 industry professionals by the Union of Enologists showed that among those who had caught the virus, more than a third said the disease had affected their ability to do their work. Student enologists were dropping out of courses after falling ill with the virus, the union said. The union's leaders said they wrote to President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Jean Castex to ask that wine tasters be moved to the front of the line for vaccine shots. When asked what it meant for a wine taster to be deprived of their sense of taste or smell, he responded,
"It's like a musician who lost their instrument. Can we ask a musician to play without a violin?"
As she recovered, Pallas would raid her kitchen morning and evening and deeply inhale the scent of spices, vanilla pods, coffee beans, whatever she could lay her hands on to retrain her nose. While she now easily identifies the dominant flavors in a wine, Pallas said she still struggles with the deeper, more complex notes. It's a process of re-education that is all too familiar to champagne maker Charles Philippina. Doctors put him into an induced coma for a week in October while he battled the virus. He woke up to find he had partially lost his senses.
I didn't completely lose my sense of taste or smell, but there were things I tasted differently. Certain flavors I remain able to taste and figure out normally, while others have vanished a bit. And even today, there are some things that I taste better than others, and it's coming back little by little.
The 58-year-old said aromas of dark fruits and berries were simple to detect, but not those of tangerines and ripe citrus fruits. The champagne maker's finest vintages sell for some €600 a bottle. As of now, Philippina says his taste and smell is back to 90% of what it used to be. It has taken him 6 months to recover.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.